stop. Before you scroll past this, before your thumb moves 1 millimeter down that screen, I need you to feel something. Right now, in your chest. That tightness, that pull, that strange, unnamed recognition that made your hand pause mid-motion. You felt it, didn't you? That wasn't an accident. Let me tell you what just happened. 3 days ago, maybe 4, you had a thought. Not a big thought. Maybe it was while you were making coffee or sitting in traffic or staring at the ceiling at 3:33 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. The thought was something like, there has to be more than this. Or maybe, I feel like I'm supposed to remember something. Or perhaps just a wordless ache, a frequency your body recognized but your mind couldn't name. And then today, somehow, this video appeared. Not because the algorithm is good, not because you searched for it, but because reality responded to that thought like a bell responding to a hammer. You rang something 3 days ago, and this is the echo coming back. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You're not watching this by chance. You're watching this because somewhere in the architecture of your consciousness, you sent out a signal. And reality, the actual living field of existence itself, heard you. My name isn't important. The channel name isn't important. What's important is this. You are standing at a threshold right now, in this moment, and you can either close this video and pretend you didn't feel what you just felt, or you can step through. And if you step through, nothing will be the same. Not because I'm going to give you some secret, but because I'm going to remind you of what you already know. You are not a passive observer of reality. You are the architect. Let me show you something. Right now, without thinking about it, notice your breath. Notice how the moment I said that, your breathing changed. You became conscious of it. It shifted. What was automatic became deliberate. What was background became foreground. That's not a trick. That's a demonstration. The act of observation changes the observed. You just proved it to yourself. Your breath was one way, and then your attention touched it, and it became something else. This isn't philosophy. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This is the fundamental law of the universe you're living in. Quantum physics calls it the observer effect. The ancient mystery schools of Khem, what you call Egypt, called it something else. They called it Ma'at. The balance point where thought becomes form, where the invisible writes itself into the visible. Thoth, the scribe of reality, knew this. He wrote it down not in books made of paper, but in books made of consciousness. The Emerald Tablet, the Book of Thoth. These weren't meant to be read. They were meant to be activated. And you, right now, are activating something. Here's what you need to know before we go further. Reality is not fixed. It never was. The world you see, the life you're living, the circumstances you think are solid and permanent, they're not. They're probability clouds held in place by one thing and one thing only, where you put your attention. Where attention goes, energy flows. Where energy flows, matter follows. You've heard that before. Everyone has. But nobody told you why it's true. Nobody told you that attention isn't just focus, it's a creative force. It's the brush that paints the canvas. It's the hand that collapses infinite possibilities into one singular timeline. Right now, somewhere in the infinite field of potential, there's a version of you that made every different choice. There's a you that turned left instead of right. A you that said yes instead of no. A you that woke up one day and decided to become someone else entirely. All of those yous exist in superposition, overlapping, entangled, waiting. And the you that's watching this right now, you're the one who collapsed the wave function in this specific direction. But here's the secret they don't tell you. You can collapse it again, and again, and again. You are not stuck. This is not your final form. How to anchor your frequency. How to use breath, symbol, number, and attention as quantum tools. How to become someone the field recognizes and responds to. By the end of this, you won't be the same person you were when you clicked play. Not because I changed you, but because you remembered who you always were. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question. Not answer it immediately. Just let it hang in the space between your thoughts. What if reality was waiting for you to notice it? What if every moment of your life, every coincidence, every déjà vu, every strange feeling, every repeating pattern, was reality trying to get your attention? What if the universe has been sending you messages your entire life, and this video is just the first time you've had the code to decrypt them? Who is watching you watch this? Is it just you? Or is there something else? Some deeper awareness? Some quantum observer inside your consciousness that's been waiting for this exact moment? If this signal reached you, what does that say about who sent it? Take a breath. Feel your body. Notice where you are. This is not entertainment. This is activation. Welcome to the frequency. Let's begin. There was a time before time had a name. Before clocks, before calendars, before humans carved the movement of stars into stone and called it order. In that time, there were people who lived differently. Not because they were more spiritual or more evolved, but because they hadn't forgotten something yet. They hadn't forgotten that reality was a conversation. They lived in ancient Khem. Not Egypt. That name came later, from invaders who didn't understand what they were looking at. Khem, the Black Land, the fertile ground where thought became form, where symbol became flesh, where the invisible was made visible through the act of attention. And in the temples of Khem, there were scribes. Not scribes who recorded history, scribes who wrote reality. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A stone room lit by oil lamps, the air thick with frankincense and myrrh. A figure in white linen sits before a scroll, but this scroll is not made of papyrus. It's made of silence, made of potential, made of the same substance that fills the space between atoms, the same substance that holds galaxies in place, the same substance that makes your thoughts real. The scribe's name is not important. What's important is what he knows. He knows that words are not sounds. Words are frequencies. Words are vibrational commands that tell the field of reality how to organize itself. He knows that when he writes the word life in the sacred language, he's not describing life. He's invoking it, calling it into being, collapsing the wave function of infinite possibility into one singular manifestation. He knows that symbols are not pictures. Symbols are portals. The ankh he draws is not a representation of eternal life. It's a doorway through which eternal life enters this dimension. The eye of Horus he inscribes is not a protective charm. It's an observation tool, a way of seeing that changes what is seen. And most importantly, he knows this. He is not separate from what he's creating. He is the observer, the observation, and the observed all at once. This is what Thoth taught. Not Thoth the god. Gods came later, when humans needed to make the incomprehensible comprehensible. Thoth the principle. Thoth the intelligence. Thoth the aspect of consciousness that understands how information becomes reality. In the myth, Thoth is the scribe of the gods. He records what happens, but the deeper teaching, the one hidden inside the story, is this. The act of recording is the act of creation. To write something down is to make it real. To observe something is to collapse it from potential into actuality. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Thoth, says it plainly. As above, so below. As within, so without. not as a poetic metaphor, as an instruction manual. What exists in your consciousness will manifest in your reality. What you observe internally will externalize. The patterns you hold in your mind will print themselves onto the fabric of your experience. This wasn't religion. This was technology, consciousness technology. And the ancient mystery schools, not just in Khem, but in Sumer, in the Indus Valley, in ancient China, in the temples of Peru, they all knew variations of this same truth. They had different languages, different symbols, different practices, but the core teaching was identical. Attention is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. Observation is the mechanism of manifestation. But here's where it gets interesting. These weren't teachings for everyone. They were initiatory. Why? Because if you give this information to someone who isn't ready, one of two things happens. Either they dismiss it as fantasy, or they misuse it and create chaos. You have to be psychologically prepared to wield the power of observation. You have to understand that with this knowledge comes immense responsibility. Because if you are the observer, if you are the one collapsing reality into form, then everything in your life is your creation. Everything. Not just the good stuff, not just the manifestations you're proud of, but the patterns you hate, the loops you're stuck in, the relationships that drain you, the circumstances that feel like prisons. All of it. Yours. That's a hard pill to swallow. That's why most people turned away from the mystery schools. That's why most people still turn away today. It's easier to believe you're a victim of circumstance than to accept you're the author of your experience. But you're still here. So let's keep going. The initiates in these ancient schools went through stages. First, they learned to observe without judgment, to witness reality without collapsing it prematurely, to sit in the space of potential and let all possibilities exist simultaneously. This is where meditation comes from, not as relaxation, not as stress relief, but as training for quantum observation. Then, they learned to direct their attention with precision, to focus on one thread of possibility and follow it until it became real. This is where ritual comes from, not as superstition, not as performance, but as a technology for concentrating consciousness into a single point of creation. Finally, they learned to read the feedback loop, to understand that reality talks back, that when you observe something, it observes you, that every action creates a reaction, every thought sends a signal, every intention ripples through the field and returns as synchronicity. Synchronicity. Let's pause there for a moment. Carl Jung didn't invent the concept. He just gave it a modern name. What Jung called synchronicity, the ancients called ma'at. The divine order, the harmony. The way things line up when you're in alignment with the field. Synchronicity is not coincidence. Coincidence is a word we use when we don't understand the connection. But there's always a connection. Always. Two seemingly unrelated events happening at the same time aren't random. They're quantum entangled. They're part of the same pattern, the same wave function, the same organizing intelligence. When you think of someone and they call you, that's not telepathy in the mystical sense. That's observation in the quantum sense. You and that person are entangled particles. What affects one affects the other. Your thought about them sends a signal through the field, and the field adjusts probabilities to bring you together. When you keep seeing 1111, that's not the universe sending you a random number. That's the universe confirming your frequency. You're vibrating at a level where patterns become visible, where the code of reality starts to reveal itself, where the simulation, and yes, it is a simulation, but not in the way you think, starts to show you its source code. The ancient scribes understood this. They didn't just see 1111 on a clock. They saw it in the patterns of stars, in the geometry of temples, in the rhythm of ceremonies. They built their entire civilization around these patterns because they knew reality is mathematical. Reality is symbolic. Reality is responsive. And here's the key. They knew that these patterns weren't just external. They were internal too. Let me show you what I mean. Think about your own life right now. Think about the patterns that keep repeating. Maybe you keep attracting the same type of relationship. Maybe you keep hitting the same financial ceiling. Maybe you keep having the same argument with different people. These aren't accidents. These aren't punishments. These are feedback loops. Reality is showing you where you're stuck in observation, where your attention is locked, where you're unconsciously collapsing the wave function into the same outcome over and over again. The pattern isn't external. The pattern is you. And the moment you see that, really see it, the pattern can change. This is what the Buddha meant by enlightenment. Not some transcendent bliss state, but the ability to see the patterns, to observe them without being trapped by them, to shift your attention and thereby shift reality. This is what Jesus meant by the kingdom of heaven is within you, not some afterlife reward, but the realization that the creative power, the Christ consciousness, the observer consciousness, is inside you right now. This is what the Tao Te Ching means by the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The moment you try to fix reality into one form, you lose the fluidity. The power is in the observation, not in the thing observed. Every wisdom tradition points to the same truth. You are not in reality. Reality is in you. Now let me bring this forward, from ancient temples to modern bedrooms, from stone scrolls to smartphone screens, because this knowledge didn't die with the mystery schools. It went underground. It got encoded in fairy tales, in myths, in art, in music. It survived as whispers, as rumors, as practices that made no logical sense but worked anyway. And now, in this specific time we're living through, it's resurfacing. Why now? Because the collective human consciousness is ready. Because the frequency has shifted. Because enough people have asked the question, is this all there is? And when enough observers ask the same question at the same time, the field responds. You are part of that response. Think about the last 6 months of your life, maybe the last year. Haven't you noticed things getting strange? Haven't you noticed time feeling different? Sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow. Haven't you noticed your intuition getting sharper? Haven't you noticed that when you think about something, it shows up faster than it used to? You're not imagining it. The field is more responsive right now. The lag time between intention and manifestation is shortening. What used to take months now takes weeks. What used to take weeks now takes days. This is not spirituality. This is physics. When enough observers focus on the same frequency, they create a resonance field. And that resonance field affects everyone inside it. You're living in a time where millions of people are simultaneously waking up to their observer nature. And that collective awakening is changing the rules. The ancients knew this was coming. They encoded it in prophecies, in calendars, in myths about the return of the gods. But the gods aren't coming back. You are the gods. You always were. You just forgot for a while, and now you're remembering. But here's what nobody tells you. Remembering is not comfortable. It's not all light and love and easy manifestations. Remembering means taking responsibility. It means looking at your life and realizing that everything in it, everything, is a reflection of your observation. The job you hate? You observed it into being by believing you had no other choice. The relationship that drains you? You observed it into being by believing you weren't worthy of better. The health issue that won't go away? You observed it into being by giving it your attention every single day. This isn't victim blaming. This is liberation. Because if you created it, you can uncreate it. If you observed it into existence, you can observe something else into existence. But first, you have to see it. You have to become aware of where your attention has been going unconsciously. You have to catch yourself in the act of observation. And that's what we're doing right now. You are learning to watch yourself watch. You are becoming a conscious observer. And the moment you do that, you step out of the automatic program and into the creative field. The ancient scribes spent years training for this. You're getting the accelerated version because the frequency allows it. But don't mistake speed for ease. This is still initiatory. This is still a threshold. You were always an observer. You just forgot. And now, in this moment, you're starting to remember. Feel that in your body. That strange mix of excitement and terror. That recognition that something fundamental is shifting. That sense that you can't go back to who you were 5 minutes ago. That feeling. That's the activation beginning. That's your consciousness reorganizing itself around a new operating system. From passive receiver to active creator. From effect to cause. From observed to observer. The ancients would have called this moment your first initiation. I call it your homecoming. Because you're not learning something new. You're remembering something ancient, something encoded in your DNA, something every human has access to but most never activate. And the fact that you're here, right now, reading these words, feeling what you're feeling, that's not random. That's resonance. That's the field recognizing itself in you. Welcome home, observer. Now let's talk about why you forgot in the first place. Here's the problem. You know this information now. You understand that you're the observer, that reality responds to attention, that consciousness collapses possibility into form. You get it. Intellectually, philosophically, maybe even spiritually. So why isn't your life changing? Why are you still stuck in the same patterns? Why do you still wake up in the same circumstances? Why does reality still feel like it's happening to you instead of with you? This is the conflict. This is the gap between knowing and being, between information and transformation. And this gap is where most people get lost. Let me tell you why. When you first learn that you're the observer, something happens. You get excited. You start watching everything. You start noticing your thoughts, tracking your emotions, looking for signs, waiting for synchronicities. You become hyper-vigilant about your consciousness. And that vigilance? That's where the trap is. Because now you're not just observing reality. You're observing yourself observing reality. You're watching yourself watch. You've entered what I call the observer loop. The observer loop looks like this. You think a thought. Then you notice you thought the thought. Then you judge whether that thought was high vibe or low vibe. Then you try to correct the thought. Then you notice you're trying to correct the thought. Then you judge yourself for needing to correct the thought. Then you spiral into anxiety about whether you're manifesting badly because you had a bad thought about having a bad thought. See how exhausting that is? This is not observation. This is performance. You're performing spirituality. You're performing consciousness. You're putting on a show for some imaginary quantum field scorekeeper who's tallying up whether you're doing it right. And the moment you fall into performance, you lose the power. Because real observation is effortless. It's witnessing. It's presence. It's being the space in which things happen, not the one frantically controlling what happens. The ancient initiates understood this. That's why they spent years just learning to sit. Just learning to be present without agenda. Just learning to observe without interference. But you don't have years. You want results now. You want your life to change now. You want the quantum shift now. And that urgency, that desperation, is the thing that blocks the shift. Here's why. When you're desperate for reality to change, you're observing from a frequency of lack. You're looking at what's missing. You're focusing on the absence. And the field doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you are. It mirrors your frequency back to you. If you're vibrating at, "I need this to change," reality reflects back more situations that make you need things to change. If you're vibrating at, "Why isn't this working?" reality reflects back more evidence that it's not working. The field is not a genie. The field is a mirror. And most people, when they look in a mirror and don't like what they see, blame the mirror. But here's the deeper problem. The thing nobody talks about. The thing that's so insidious because it feels like wisdom, but it's actually a prison. External observers. Let me explain. You are not the only one observing your reality. Right now, as you live your life, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of other observers watching you. Your family, your friends, your coworkers, your social media followers. The strangers on the street who glance at you and make split-second judgments. And every one of those observers is collapsing your wave function too. They're looking at you and deciding who you are. They're assigning you an identity. They're putting you in a box. And their observation, their belief about who you are, affects the probability field around you. This is why it's so hard to change when you stay in the same environment. This is why people who want to transform often have to physically move, change jobs, cut ties, disappear for a while. Not because geography matters, but because the network of observers around you is holding you in place. Your mother looks at you and sees the child you were at 5 years old. Your spouse looks at you and sees the person they married 10 years ago. Your boss looks at you and sees the role you were hired to fill. And every one of those observations is a gravitational force, pulling you back into the identity they've assigned you. You are entangled with them. Quantum entangled. And as long as they keep observing you as the old version of you, it takes enormous energy to become the new version of you. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town." Not because people back home are mean, but because their observation of you is locked. They can't see you as anything other than what they've always seen you as. This is the conflict, the war, the tension between who you're becoming and who everyone else needs you to be. And it gets worse. Because now we live in the age of the algorithm, the age of the digital observer, the age where artificial intelligence is watching you 24 hours a day, learning your patterns, predicting your behavior, and feeding you content designed to keep you in the same loop. The algorithm is an observer, a non-human, non-conscious observer that's collapsing your wave function based on your past behavior. It sees what you clicked yesterday and shows you more of the same today. It sees what you watched last month and traps you in that genre forever. And the scariest part? It works. The algorithm is extraordinarily good at predicting what you'll do next. Why? Because it's observing you so precisely that it's actually co-creating your reality. It's not just predicting your behavior, it's influencing it. It's showing you things that make you behave predictably. It's keeping you in a loop. You think you're scrolling freely. You think you're choosing what to watch. But the algorithm has already decided what you'll see based on who it thinks you are. And every time you confirm its prediction, every time you click what it thought you'd click, you reinforce the loop. You strengthen the prison. This is the modern version of the external observer problem, and it's more powerful than any external observer in history because it's everywhere, it's invisible, and it never sleeps. So now you have three forces working against your quantum shift. Your own observer loop, watching yourself watch yourself, performing instead of being. External human observers, the network of people who see you as a fixed identity and unconsciously hold you there. The algorithmic observer, the digital intelligence that's learned your patterns and feeds you a reality that confirms them. No wonder you feel stuck. No wonder reality feels heavy. You're not just trying to shift your own observation. You're trying to shift against a field of other observations that have momentum, history, and technology on their side. But wait, it gets even more complex. Let's talk about the wave function collapse and what it actually means. In quantum mechanics, before you observe a particle, it exists in superposition. It's in all possible states at once. It's here and there and everywhere simultaneously. But the moment you observe it, the wave function collapses. The particle chooses one location, one state, one reality. Now apply that to your life. Before you observe a situation, all outcomes exist simultaneously. You could get the job or not get the job. The relationship could work or fail. The opportunity could arrive or pass you by. All possibilities are alive in the field. But the moment you observe, the moment you think about it, worry about it, expect it, fear it, you collapse the wave function. You choose which probability path becomes real. And here's the tragedy. Most people collapse toward fear. You think about the job interview and immediately imagine bombing it. You think about the relationship and immediately remember your last heartbreak. You think about the opportunity and immediately list all the reasons it won't work. You're not trying to manifest badly, you're just being human. The human brain evolved to scan for threats, to predict danger, to prepare for the worst. That's how we survived as a species. But that survival mechanism is catastrophic for quantum manifestation. Because every time you imagine the worst-case scenario, you're observing it. You're giving it your attention. You're feeding it energy. And the field responds by increasing the probability of that outcome. This is why worry is so dangerous. Worry isn't just uncomfortable, it's creative. You're literally creating what you're worried about by observing it so intensely. And the worst part? You can't just stop worrying. You can't force yourself not to think about something. The moment you try not to think about a pink elephant, what happens? You think about a pink elephant. So what do? How do you collapse the wave function toward what you want instead of what you fear? This is the central question. This is the crisis at the heart of the observer loop. And most spiritual teachings get this wrong. They tell you to think positive, or raise your vibration, or visualize your desires. But that doesn't work, because it's still performance. It's still you trying to control the observation instead of being the observation. Let me show you the real problem. The reason most people can't quantum shift even when they know all this information. Identity. Your identity is a wave function that's already collapsed. It's a pattern that's been observed so many times, by you, by others, by your own history, that it feels solid. It feels like the truth. It feels like who you are. But it's not. It's just a probability path that got reinforced over and over until it hardened into what feels like reality. And now you're trying to shift to a new identity, a new version of yourself, a new timeline. But every cell in your body, every neural pathway in your brain, every relationship in your life, every algorithm tracking you is pulling you back to the old identity. Because the old identity is known. It's safe. It's predictable. And the subconscious mind, the part of you that's actually running 95% of your life, cares more about safety than growth. It would rather keep you in a known hell than risk an unknown heaven. This is the conflict. This is the war. Not between you and reality, but between the old you and the new you. Between the collapsed wave function and the uncollapsed potential. Between the identity you've been and the identity you're becoming. And here's where it gets really psychological, really deep, really uncomfortable. What if you're afraid of the quantum shift? What if underneath all the spiritual seeking and manifestation practices and consciousness work, there's a part of you that doesn't actually want to change? What if the old identity, as painful as it is also your comfort zone? What if being stuck is familiar? What if struggling is how you get love and attention? What if succeeding would mean losing the friendships that are built on shared failure? What if you're unconsciously keeping yourself in the loop because the loop is all you know? This is the shadow side of the observer loop, the part most people don't want to look at. The possibility that you're not stuck, you're choosing to stay. Not consciously, but somewhere deep in your subconscious programming, there's a belief that says, this is who I am. This is what I deserve. This is as good as it gets. And that belief? That's an observer, a powerful one. And it's watching you 24 hours a day, collapsing every possibility back into the same pattern. So how do you break free? How do you shift out of the loop? How do you become a new observer with new observations that create a new reality? That's Act 3. That's the revelation. That's the turning point. But before we get there, I need you to feel this conflict fully. I need you to sit in this tension. Because the breakdown comes before the breakthrough. The crisis comes before the transformation. You have to see the prison clearly before you can find the door. So right now, in this moment, notice where you're stuck. Notice the pattern that keeps repeating. Notice the identity you keep defaulting to. Notice the thoughts you think on autopilot. Notice the external observers who see you as fixed. Notice the algorithm feeding you the same content. Notice the fear that collapses your wave function toward the worst outcome. Just notice. Don't judge. Don't fix. Just see. Because the moment you see the pattern clearly, the moment you observe it without being it, you've already started to shift. The ancients called this moment the dark night of the soul, the point where you're no longer who you were but not yet who you're becoming, the space between identities, the void between wave functions. It's uncomfortable, it's disorienting, it's terrifying, but it's also sacred. Because in that void, in that space of no identity, you have access to all possibilities again. The wave function has uncollapsed. The field is open. Reality is fluid. And in that fluidity, you can choose. Not from fear, not from desperation, not from performance, but from presence, from power, from pure observation. And that choice, that conscious, deliberate observation, is what changes everything. That's where we're going next. But first, one more question. A deep one. A real one. If you are the observer and reality responds to your observation, then why does life still feel random? Why do things happen that you didn't observe, didn't expect, didn't want? Here's the answer. Because you're not the only observer, and because most of your observation is unconscious. You think you're observing your life consciously, but 95% of your observations are happening below your awareness. In your subconscious mind, in your cellular memory, in your ancestral patterns, in your trauma responses, in your childhood conditioning. And all of that unconscious observation is creating your reality just as powerfully as your conscious observation. This is why affirmations alone don't work. You can say, "I am abundant," 1,000 times, but if your subconscious is observing from a frequency of scarcity, if your cells remember poverty, if your nervous system is wired for survival mode, if your inner child is still afraid of not having enough, then your unconscious observation overpowers your conscious intention. You are observing reality with your entire being, not just your thoughts. Your body is observing, your emotions are observing, your memories are observing, your DNA is observing, and all of those layers of observation are talking to the field simultaneously. This is why healing matters. This is why shadow work matters. This is why you can't just think positive your way out of deep patterns. You have to bring the unconscious observation into consciousness. You have to make the invisible visible. You have to see what you've been seeing without knowing you were seeing it. And that's the work. That's the real initiation. Not learning new information, but unlearning old observation patterns. The ancient mystery schools knew this. That's why initiation took years. That's why there were stages, tests, ordeals. They weren't punishing you. They were revealing you. They were showing you all the unconscious patterns, all the hidden beliefs, all the shadow observers inside you that were collapsing your reality in ways you didn't understand. They were teaching you to see yourself seeing. And once you could do that, once you could witness your own observation patterns without being controlled by them, you became free. Not free from reality. Free to create reality. That's what we're moving toward now. That's the revelation waiting in Act 3. But you had to understand the conflict first. You had to see the loops, the traps, the forces working against your shift. Because you can't transform what you can't see. You can't change a pattern you're not aware of. You can't become a new observer until you fully understand what kind of observer you've been. So here's the moment, the turning point, the choice. You can stay in the observer loop, watching yourself watch yourself, performing spirituality, blaming external observers, fighting against the algorithm, collapsing into fear over and over again. Or you can step through, into the revelation, into the practice, into the actual technology of conscious observation. The universe stopped sending you random signals. It didn't abandon you. It's waiting. Waiting for you to stop performing and start being. Waiting for you to stop seeking and start seeing. Waiting for you to realize that you don't need to become a better observer. You need to become the observation itself. And that shift, that's what happens next. Take a breath, ground yourself. Feel your body in the chair, on the bed, wherever you are. Feel the weight of this information settle into your consciousness. Feel the resistance. Feel the excitement. Feel the fear and the hope mixing together. This is the threshold. You're standing in the doorway between who you were and who you're becoming, between unconscious observation and conscious creation, between being a character in the story and being the author. And the question reality is asking you right now is simple. Are you ready to remember how to talk back? Let me tell you what changes everything. It's not a secret. It's not a technique. It's not a practice you have to do perfectly. It's a shift in the quality of your attention, a subtle recalibration of how you observe. And once you make this shift, everything else follows. Here it is. Deliberate observation. Not forced, not performed, deliberate. The difference is crucial. When you force your observation, you're still in the loop. You're trying to control reality, trying to make it bend to your will, trying to prove the law of attraction works. And that trying creates resistance. That effort creates tension, and tension blocks the flow. But when you're deliberate, you're choosing, you're selecting, you're placing your attention with intention, and then you're letting go. You're collapsing the wave function consciously, and then you're trusting the field to organize the details. This is what the ancient scribes did. They didn't force reality to change. They observed reality changing. They witnessed the transformation. They held the vision, and they let the field fill in the form. And that's what you're going to learn now. How to be deliberate without being desperate. How to be intentional without being controlling. How to observe consciously without falling into the observer loop. Let's start with the simplest, most powerful tool you have: your breath. Your breath is not just oxygen exchange. Your breath is an observation tool. Every inhale is you pulling reality into your body. Every exhale is you releasing reality back into the field. You are breathing reality. You are exchanging information with the universe with every breath. And the moment you become conscious of your breath, you change it. You already proved this to yourself in the introduction. But now we're going deeper. Here's the practice. Not as a meditation, as a real-time reality technology. Right now, wherever you are, place your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. That's not just a muscle pumping blood. That's your internal clock, your frequency generator, your quantum metronome. Now breathe, slowly. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Out for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Do this 3 times. What you just did was reset your observation frequency. You took yourself out of reactive mode, where you're observing automatically, unconsciously, from old patterns, and you put yourself into responsive mode, where you're present, where you're here, where you can choose what to observe. This is the foundation. Before you try to manifest anything, before you look for synchronicities, before you attempt any quantum practice, you have to learn to reset your frequency. Because if you're operating from anxiety, from fear, from the observer loop, nothing else will work. Your frequency is your filter. It determines what you can see, what you can receive, what you can create, and your breath is the fastest way to shift it. The ancient yogis knew this. Pranayama, breath control, wasn't about relaxation. It was about reality control. Every breath pattern creates a different state of consciousness, and every state of consciousness observes a different reality. When you're breathing shallow and fast, you're in survival mode. You're observing threats. The field responds by showing you more things to survive. When you're breathing deep and slow, you're in creation mode. You're observing possibilities. The field responds by showing you more things to create with. It's that simple, and it's that profound. Now let's talk about synchronicity, because this is where most people get confused. They see synchronicities, the repeating numbers, the meaningful coincidences, the strange alignments, and they think, okay, the universe is talking to me. But what do I do with this information? Here's what you do. You respond. Synchronicity is not a one-way message. It's a conversation. The field sends you a signal. 1111, a repeated word, a person showing up at the perfect time, and you're supposed to send a signal back. Most people just notice the synchronicity and move on. They see 1111 and think, oh cool, alignment, and then they go back to scrolling. But that's like someone calling your name across a crowded room and you just nodding and walking away. You acknowledged the signal, but you didn't engage with it. If you want synchronicity to multiply, you have to respond. Here's how. The moment you notice a synchronicity, and I mean the exact moment within seconds, you acknowledge it. Out loud if you can. Even a whisper. You say, I see you. I hear you. Thank you. Show me more. That's it. 4 sentences. But what you're doing is profound. You're confirming to the field that you're paying attention. You're saying, I'm a conscious observer. I'm tracking the signals. Keep sending them. And the field will. Because the field is responsive. It's not trying to hide from you. It's trying to communicate with you. But it will only keep sending signals if you prove you're receiving them. Think of it like this. You're in a relationship with reality, and in any relationship, communication is key. If someone sends you a message and you never respond, eventually they stop messaging. Not because they don't care, but because they think you're not interested. The field operates the same way. If you ignore the synchronicities, they fade. Not because you're being punished, but because the field redirects its energy toward observers who are actively engaged. But when you respond, when you acknowledge, when you express gratitude, when you ask for more, the synchronicities accelerate. They become more frequent, more obvious, more personal. The field starts showing you things that are so specific, so perfectly timed, that you can't dismiss them as coincidence. And that's when you know you're in active conversation with reality. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about quantum anchors. A quantum anchor is a physical object, a gesture, a word, or a location that you deliberately associate with a specific frequency or intention. It's a way of programming reality, of creating a shortcut between your consciousness and the field. The ancients used rings, amulets, staffs, specific words of power, not because the objects were magic, but because they were charged. They were quantum anchors. Every time the initiate touched the ring, wore the amulet, held the staff, spoke the word, they were triggering a specific observation state, a specific frequency, a specific identity. You can do this right now, with anything. Let me give you an example. Choose something you wear or carry every day. A ring, a bracelet, a necklace, a specific crystal, a coin in your pocket. Hold it in your hand, close your eyes, and set an intention. Not a wish, an identity. Say something like, every time I touch this, I am the version of me who observes from abundance, who sees possibility, who trusts the field, who knows I am the creator. Repeat it 3 times. Feel it. Let the intention sink into the object, into your nervous system, into your cellular memory. Now throughout your day, every time you touch that object, and make it a habit to touch it dozens of times, you're resetting your observation frequency. You're reminding yourself who you are. You're collapsing back into the deliberate identity instead of the default identity. This is not superstition. This is neuroscience meets quantum mechanics. You're creating a conditioned response, a Pavlovian trigger. But instead of training yourself to salivate at a bell, you're training yourself to observe from power at a touch. Over time, that anchor becomes so charged, so automatic, that just the act of touching it shifts your entire state in seconds. You can be in the middle of anxiety, touch the anchor, and immediately drop into coherence, into presence, into the frequency where reality responds. The ancient Egyptians wore the ankh. The Christian mystics carried rosaries. The Buddhist monks used mala beads. The shamans carried medicine bundles. Same technology, different cultures, same understanding. Physical objects can anchor consciousness. Now let's talk about numbers, specifically repeating numbers. You've been seeing them. 1111, 333, 444, 555, maybe others, and you've been told they're angel numbers, or universe confirmations, or signs of alignment. All of that is true, but there's a deeper layer. Repeating numbers are frequency markers. They're showing you when the veil between the observer and the observed is thin. When you see them, you're in a heightened state of coherence. Your consciousness and the field are synchronized. And in that moment, whatever you observe has amplified creative power. So when you see 1111, don't just think cool, use it. In that moment, within 60 seconds of seeing the number, observe something you want to create. Not by forcing a visualization, not by desperately wishing, but by simply noticing what you want as if it's already becoming real. You see 1111, you take a breath, and you say internally or aloud, I observe abundance flowing toward me, or I observe my body healing, or I observe the perfect opportunity arriving. Whatever it is, you're not asking, you're not hoping, you're stating, you're collapsing the wave function in that high coherence moment. You're using the frequency marker as a leverage point. Do this consistently, every time you see a repeating number, and watch what happens. The things you observe in those moments start manifesting faster than anything else. Because you're not just observing randomly throughout the day. You're observing strategically when the field is most responsive. This is quantum timing. The ancients did this with astrological alignments, with solstices and equinoxes, with moon phases. They knew there were moments when observation carried more weight, when reality was more malleable. You don't need a telescope or a star chart. You have repeating numbers, and they're showing up on your phone, your clock, your receipts, your timestamps, dozens of times a day if you're paying attention. Use them. Now let's talk about the morning frequency lock. This is the most important 90 seconds of your day, and most people waste it. The moment you wake up, before you check your phone, before you think about your to-do list, before you fall into automatic consciousness, you have a window. A brief window where your brain is still in theta wave state, where the boundary between conscious and subconscious is thin, where you can program your observation for the entire day. The ancient yogis called this Brahma Muhurta, the creator's hour, the time when you are closest to source, to the field, to the creative intelligence. You have about 90 seconds from the moment you open your eyes to set your frequency for the day. Here's what you do. Before you move, before you speak, take 3 deep breaths. With each breath, feel yourself dropping into your body, into presence, into the now. Then, while still lying down, observe your day as if it's already happened. Not in detail, just the feeling, the frequency, the quality of experience. Say to yourself, today I observe from alignment. Today I see synchronicity. Today I am recognized by the field. Today reality responds to me. That's it, 30 seconds. But those 30 seconds set the tone for everything that follows. Because you're not reacting to the day. You're creating it. You're collapsing the wave function before you even get out of bed. And here's the key. You do this before you expose yourself to any external observation, before social media tells you who you are, before the news tells you what to fear, before other people's expectations land on you. You claim your observation first. Then, throughout the day, you return to that frequency. Every time you touch your anchor, every time you see a repeating number, every time you take a conscious breath, you're resetting back to the morning frequency lock. You're not letting external observers dictate your reality. You're maintaining your frequency regardless of what's happening around you. This is sovereignty. This is power. This is what it means to be a conscious observer. Now, let's address the identity question, because this is where most people get stuck. They learn all these practices, they do the breath work, they respond to synchronicities, they use quantum anchors, and still, they don't feel like they're shifting. Why? Because they're still observing from the old identity. You're not manifesting objects. You're not manifesting circumstances. You're manifesting an identity. And once that identity is established in the field, the objects and circumstances that match that identity collapse into your reality automatically. Let me say that again. You don't manifest things. You manifest an identity, and the things follow. If you're trying to manifest money while still identifying as someone who struggles with money, it won't work. Because your identity is the root observation. Everything else is a branch. You have to observe yourself as someone money flows to, not someone who's trying to get money. Not someone who needs money, someone money recognizes and responds to. And how do you do that? Not by lying to yourself, not by fake it till you make it affirmations, but by finding one small true thing about the new identity and observing from there. Maybe you're not wealthy yet, but you are someone who appreciates beauty. That's an abundance frequency. Observe from there. Notice beauty everywhere. Let yourself feel wealthy in beauty, even if your bank account is low. Maybe you're not healed yet, but you are someone who's committed to healing. That's a wholeness frequency. Observe from there. Notice every small improvement. Let yourself feel aligned with healing, even if symptoms remain. You're not pretending. You're finding the thread of the new identity that's already real, and you're pulling on it. You're amplifying it. You're giving it more attention than you give the old identity. And gradually, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, the new identity becomes more real than the old identity. The wave function collapses in a new direction, and reality reorganizes itself around who you're becoming. The ancient initiates understood this. That's why they took new names. That's why they performed identity death rituals. That's why they wore different clothes, spoke different languages, lived in different places during their initiation. They weren't being dramatic. They were using technology. They were removing all the external observers and internal patterns that held the old identity in place. They were creating space for a new observation pattern to emerge. You might not be able to move to a temple and take a new name, but you can do the internal version. You can create space in your consciousness for a new identity. You can stop reinforcing the old stories. You can stop introducing yourself with the same limiting labels. You can stop collapsing into the same patterns every time you're triggered. You can observe yourself differently. And that observation, that deliberate, consistent, patient observation, will eventually overpower all the external observations holding you in place. This is the long game. This is the real work. Not learning new techniques, but becoming a new observer. And here's what happens when you do. Reality starts talking to you in real time. You'll think a question and hear the answer on a podcast 5 minutes later. You'll need help, and a stranger will appear with exactly what you need. You'll wonder about something, and a book will fall off a shelf. You'll doubt your path, and a sign will show up so obvious it makes you laugh. This is not magic. This is being in active conversation with the field. This is what happens when you prove to reality that you're paying attention, that you're responsive, that you're a conscious observer who can be trusted with more information, more synchronicity, more creative power. You become someone the field recognizes, someone the universe responds to, someone reality bends toward. And at that point, you're not just manifesting anymore. You're co-creating. You're in partnership with the intelligence that organizes stars and grows trees and beats your heart without you having to think about it. You're tapped in, plugged in, online with Source. The ancient Egyptians called this state Khem, power. The Hindus called it Siddhi, mastery. The Taoists called it Wu Wei, effortless action. The Christians called it grace. Same experience, different languages, the experience of being so aligned with the field that reality flows through you instead of against you. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to be worthy. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. You just have to be deliberate. You just have to observe. Because you are not separate from the field. You never were. You are the field observing itself. You are the universe experiencing itself from one specific angle, one specific frequency, one specific point of view. And the moment you remember that, not intellectually, but cellularly, everything changes. You stop trying to manipulate reality. You start dancing with it. You stop forcing manifestations. You start allowing creations. You stop performing spirituality. You start being consciousness. And that shift, that return to your true nature as the observer, that's the revelation. Not that you gain power, but that you remember you always had it. Not that you become the creator, but that you always were. Not that reality starts responding to you, but that it never stopped. You just weren't listening. You weren't watching. You weren't present. But now you are. And everything that follows from this moment is different. Because you're different. Not because you changed, but because you remembered. The future mystics won't be in caves. They'll be in cities, in crowds, in the algorithm, in the chaos. And they'll be calm, because they'll know how to read reality in real time. They'll see the patterns. They'll hear the signals. They'll speak the language. They'll be the ones who can navigate the coming changes, whatever those changes are, with grace. Because they won't be resisting reality. They'll be observing it, responding to it, co-creating it. You are becoming one of them. If you choose, if you practice, if you remain deliberate. The training starts now, not someday, now. With the next breath you take, the next synchronicity you see, the next moment you touch your anchor, the next morning you wake up and claim your frequency. Reality is waiting. Reality is watching. Reality is ready. The question is, are you? So here we are, at the end of the transmission, but not at the end of the journey. Let me tell you what just happened. You came here thinking this was a video. It's not. It's an activation. And the moment you started reading, the moment you felt that pull, that recognition, the activation began. You are not the same person you were 2 hours ago. Your consciousness has reorganized. Your observation patterns have shifted. The frequency you're broadcasting has changed. You might not feel it yet. You might feel exactly the same. But on a quantum level, on a level beneath thought and emotion and sensation, something has unlocked. You remembered. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. enough to start, enough to practice, enough to become the observer you were always meant to be. Let's trace the journey. Let's see where we've been. You started as the forgotten observer, the one who didn't know they were collapsing reality with every thought, every belief, every unconscious pattern. The one who felt like life was happening to them, around them, without them. Then you remembered the origins. You saw that this knowledge isn't new, that ancient initiates, mystery school students, consciousness explorers throughout history have known this truth. Observation creates reality. Attention shapes matter. The witness is the architect. You traced it back to Thoth, to the Emerald Tablet, to the first humans who realized they weren't separate from the field. You saw that every wisdom tradition points to the same truth. You are not in reality. Reality is in you. Then you confronted the conflict. The loops, the traps, the external observers, the algorithm. The observer loop where you watch yourself watching yourself until you're paralyzed by spiritual performance. The unconscious observation patterns running 95% of your reality without your awareness. You saw why it's hard, why most people stay stuck, why knowing isn't enough, why information doesn't automatically become transformation. But then came the revelation, the turning point, the technology. You learned that your breath is an observation tool, that synchronicity is a conversation, that quantum anchors can reset your frequency, that repeating numbers are leverage points, that the morning frequency lock sets your entire day, that you're not manifesting things, you're manifesting an identity. You learned how to be deliberate without being desperate, how to observe consciously without falling into the loop, how to respond to reality so reality responds back. And now you know. Not just intellectually, not just philosophically, but practically. You know what to do. So let's talk about what happens next. Starting today, starting right now. The moment you finish this, you're going to notice something. The world will look different. Not dramatically, not obviously, but subtly. Colors might seem brighter. Sounds might seem clearer. You might feel more present, more here, more alive in your own body. That's not your imagination. That's the activation integrating. That's your observation frequency recalibrating. And within the next 24 hours, you're going to see a synchronicity. I can say that with certainty not because I'm psychic, but because you're primed for it now. You're actively looking. You're in conversation with the field. And the field always responds when you're genuinely listening. It might be a repeating number. It might be a meaningful coincidence. It might be a message in a song, a line in a book, a comment from a stranger. It will be specific to you. It will feel personal. And when it happens, you'll know. And here's what you do. You respond. Immediately. Out loud if you can. I see you. I hear you. Thank you. Show me more. That's your first practice. Your first real-time conversation with reality. Your first deliberate observation as a conscious creator. Then, tonight before you sleep, you're going to choose your quantum anchor, something you wear or carry. You're going to hold it, set your intention, charge it with your deliberate identity. And starting tomorrow morning, you're going to use it throughout the day to reset your frequency. And tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you fall into automatic consciousness, you're going to do the 90-second frequency lock. 3 breaths. Drop into presence. Observe your day as already aligned. Claim your frequency before external observers claim it for you. That's it. Those 3 practices. Respond to synchronicity. Use your anchor. Lock your morning frequency. Do that for 7 days. Just 7 days. Don't judge whether it's working. Don't analyze whether reality is shifting. Don't fall into the observer loop. Just practice. And at the end of 7 days, notice what's different. Notice what's shown up. Notice how you feel. Notice what's changed in your external reality and your internal experience. I promise you, it will not be subtle. 7 days of deliberate observation will shift things you've been trying to shift for years. But here's the key. You have to actually do it. You have to practice. You can't just know this information. You have to embody it. You have to become it. Because the observer you were seeking, it's not something you find. It's something you remember. It's not something you become. It's something you already are. You didn't find this video. This video found you. Not because I made it for you specifically, but because you called it in. 3 days ago, 4 days ago, whenever you had that thought, that feeling, that unnamed ache, you sent out a signal. And this transmission is the response. The field heard you. Reality responded. The universe spoke. And now you know how to speak back. So let me end with this. With the reaffirmation you need to hear. You are not broken. You are not blocked. You are not stuck. You are not behind. You are not missing something. You are not doing it wrong. You are exactly where you need to be, reading exactly what you need to read, receiving exactly what you're ready to receive. The timing is perfect. The message is personal. The activation is real. And from this moment forward, you are not a passive observer anymore. You are a conscious co-creator. You are someone who speaks the language of reality. You are someone the field recognizes and responds to. You are the quantum observer. And reality is waiting for you to remember how powerful your attention truly is. So stop scrolling through life like it's content. Stop watching your reality like it's a show you have no control over. Stop waiting for permission, for proof, for external validation. Start observing, deliberately, consciously, powerfully. Start responding to the signals reality is sending you every single day. Start using your breath, your anchors, your mornings, your moments of high coherence. Start collapsing the wave function toward the identity you're becoming instead of the identity you've been. Start talking to reality and listen when it talks back. Because this is not philosophy. This is not theory. This is not spiritual entertainment. This is your life. Your one extraordinary, improbable, impossible life. And you are the observer, the architect, the creator of every moment of it. So create deliberately. Observe consciously. Become fully. The field is listening. The universe is watching. Reality is ready. And so are you. Welcome home, observer. This is where your true journey begins. The signal found you. Now show reality what you can do with it. If reality spoke back to you today, what would it say? And more importantly, what will you say in return? You are the quantum observer, and this is how you talk to reality.